Hey, what's up, everybody? Video 44 coming at you with another video. All right, so I ain't made a Laker video in a few days, man. It's been at least a week, and I don't really know if there's anything to say. We're just getting ready for the start of the season coming up. I think the 4th is when the preseason begins, and it ain't really much to say. I mean, it's about as quiet of the NBA time as you'll ever see. Obviously, there's things going on in terms of training camp, but I haven't heard a whole lot about it. I think it's because I've been out of the loop. I ain't really been checking my sports stuff, been paying more attention to all the Diddy stuff and then other things going on in the world. But you know, to be honest with you, I just felt like chatting a little bit, see what comes out of my head. Hopefully we can get some content here. But I think the Lakers right now, if anything, we're just, you know, with low expectations, expecting a good start to the season. Hopefully we can focus on working Christian Wood and Vanderbilt back into the equation as they become healthy. Last I heard, Jalen Hood-Schifino was 100%. Had a good summer and has really stood out from what I understand in regards to training camp and just guys paying attention to him in the summer. He's the guy that's really stood out amongst the players, according to players, according to sources. So that's a lot of according, but you get the point. Players are essentially saying that Jalen's look great. And so hopefully that translates to him having a good start, and maybe we can just have a clean slate with him and put all that what we saw was behind us, basically, and kind of build upon what he was able to do in the G League. Now, it's about confidence, I think, for him, to be honest with you. You know, the idea of putting on a Laker uniform is a lot to a lot of people, you know. The idea of what it means to play next to LeBron James is a lot in and of itself. So when you put them two worlds together, it can be hard for a rookie, especially a rookie who was probably drafted, although in the range he should have, not in front of some other players that maybe you would expect for him to be drafted by, so in front of. So it's one of them situations where maybe he probably felt a little self-conscious about that, possibly. But whatever the case may be, when he stepped on the floor for the summer for the G League squad, he looked like the player we wanted him to be when we drafted him. So if he can put it all together, do it against the higher level talent, that would be really ideal. Unfortunately, he didn't get a chance to play in the summer league, and so that left us all without the ability to really comment on his progress. But I trust that it's there. I know he's been working. I've been seeing his posts on IG, and I'm optimistic that he can surprise us and really play well once he gets his feet under him, rather, and once he gets used to what it means to be on a Laker basketball floor. Once he gets those jitters out the way, it's going to get easier for him, I believe. Rarely do you have Russell Westbrook type players that just never get used to putting on a Laker uniform, always seem to cower under the pressure. And that's just how I saw it with Russell. That's rare, though. Some guys come in, they have jitters. You know, we've always had a superstar player. If it wasn't Bron, it was Kobe. So you got to get used to playing in that environment. And for a guy like Jalen, at the end of the day, we got a coach in place that's going to use a lot more common sense as it pertains to using him to be who he's supposed to be on the basketball floor. Unlike Darvin Ham, who put him out there to be God knows whatever the hell he thought that kid was going to do at the shooting guard position in situations that didn't make any sense whatsoever. I don't expect to see any of that. You know, I expect for us to use some common sense with our rotations. I hope we can. And, you know, that should be what we see. I saw some projected starting lineups, but here's the thing. You guys, if you follow me close enough over the years, I've had conversations about the starting lineup. I don't believe the starting lineup is a promotion like the politics would otherwise suggest that it is. If you're starting, then you seem to be superior over other guys. And no, it's about minutes. It's about the start of the process of rotations. You know what I mean? If a guy, put it like this, here's an example. If a guy is prone to getting in foul trouble and he doesn't mean as much to the team, like a Jackson Hayes, maybe throughout the course of 48 minutes, it's easier to manage everybody's minutes. If you start him, let him get them 2 fouls out the way, and then let the process of every rotation after that kind of fall in line with what it is that you ultimately want to see more of. Now, you would say that he's being promoted to a starting lineup, but the actuality is I'm just trying to put myself in the best position for my rotation patterns to fall in line throughout the course of the 48 minutes a bit better. And since I know he gets in foul trouble and I don't need him as much, let's get them 2 fouls out the way early. Now, that's not something I think coaches are actually doing too often, but it's an example of why the notion that a starting lineup means a guy is better than another guy, or that a guy should feel great about being in the starting lineup, it can negate some of that culture, so to speak. And I think it's necessary that it does, because the course of pattern rotation management is not an easy one. And if you can find a way for your patterns to make more sense by starting certain players, it would behoove coaches to consider that over the overall promotion idea of giving a guy starting job and then from there him just being able to stand on his high horse about it. I just think that that's something that those who are outside of the sport tend to use to manage different financial perks. Obviously, when it comes to corporations, they tend to look at starters as a thing. Maybe they can use that to lowball some of the guys who otherwise are not starting out of opportunities, because you're not starting, so we ain't got to pay you that much. That's a culture of those outside of the science of basketball. And what ends up getting confused is the logic when talking heads are talking about it, as it pertains to how much they should put credence on the idea of starting lineups meaning promotions. It's one of my biggest pet peeves, to be honest with you, when I listen to people talk about the sport. It's like, God dang, man, who cares that he's starting? Him starting ain't got nothing to do with him being better or worse than somebody else. The best examples I can think of was Andre Roberson with the Thunder back when they were in the finals, starting over James Harden. You think anybody thought he was better than James Harden at any point in time? No one thought that. No one in the world thought that, least of all his coach. Another example is Manu Ginobili with the Spurs. Did you think people didn't see Manu Ginobili as a superstar? Of course he was, but he came off the bench for the betterment of the team he played for, and what Popovich's lineup patterns were to be throughout the course of a game and a season. So that's the logic I tend to use when considering starting lineups, how much a player should be happy about starting, how much I should think he's better than the guys he's starting in front of, etc. And so for me, that projected starting lineup logic tends to negate the idea that matchups will determine what a team will likely be wise for doing when they start a certain lineup of players. You understand what I'm saying? If they go small and we go big, it may be something that I appreciate a lot of the times, but maybe it doesn't match up properly for the science itself. Here's an example. We could be finding ourselves outside of our matchup logic, trying to keep up with consistencies for lineup starting. Not to say that those lineups have to be in, the starting lineup has to be on the floor at all times, or rather at every start of every game, it has to be the same starting lineup. That logic doesn't necessarily have to be, although it can make it for a lot easier for a novice basketball mind to digest if they know that the same starting lineup is starting every night. But to be honest with you, it may be in a team's benefit to shake that up from night to night to night based on who they're going against and what they, again, lineup, pattern, logic, fallout will ultimately be throughout the course of a basketball game. So it's like, that's what I want to incorporate into the conversation, the NBA conversation specifically, because I don't really know too much about outside of that. You know, that I don't follow overseas basketball, I don't follow college, so, you know, it could very well be a different type of concept for me. But in the NBA, we got to stop letting these politics of starting players and what that means for outside of the sport itself sources. People who don't necessarily understand the game fully, but ultimately benefit from certain things and leverage themselves around certain things that take place within it. Your, corporations and your various different agents and things like that. They don't truly behold the sport as fully as they often need to for any of this to align with the logic of how they do business in a lot of cases. Some of them don't even know the sport that well. So they're not going to know the first concept of why it shouldn't be considered so important that a certain guy start over somebody else. They ain't even looking at it that way because they're too busy in the sport or what it is they're doing in regards to their business. So it's like this is when the science of basketball and the literal puzzle game and the chess game that is basketball and the business itself tend to speak a different language. This is where that happens. And so what I try to do is blend it together in my conversation to help people understand, hey, look, man, it may not necessarily make sense to just keep starting that dude just because Nike necessarily wants you to. It may not be in his best interest to get that starting position going up against whoever it is who's starting against him. Especially if the other coach is going to leave this guy out there to cook him. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So it's a very fluid sport, man. And the more we look at it that way, the better we'll be able to understand the science and be able to blend our business around the game to the logic of the game itself. So that's really what I want to say, man. I don't think that's really a thing. But even when saying that, as a fan, I find myself much more comfortable with having some consistency to the lineup rotations. Because last year we would, like I said, throwing stuff at the wall, as Darvin used to do, as I'd call it, throwing darts at the wall and hoping something sticks, and it not really necessarily equating to anything sticking at all, but a bunch of crap on the basketball floor that didn't actually make any real logical sense. I don't want to see any of that this year. I really don't. I would like to see more patterns of rotations that align with what I think can help us in some very, very simple ways, because the game of basketball, although very complex, can also be simple from person to person depending on how they manage basketball gameplay, meaning coaches. Some coaches need 160 plays. Some coaches only need to run 30 plays. Some coaches don't run any plays at all and let their team run around like chickens with their head cut off. And players tend, depending on the type of players they are, may thrive under those circumstances. So you got to know your personnel. And then from there, you got to have some consistency about your bottom line. If we're going to be a team that wants to rebound the ball, then we can't negate the patterns of rotations that allow for us to be successful in rebounding the basketball. Now, small ball is one of those things that we talk about a lot. A lot of times, although depending on positioning and the talent on the floor, smaller guys are going to have a hard time rebounding the ball. Now, a long shot, long rebound, you could be tall as hell, but if you're not in the right spot, you're not going to get the board. I get that. Sometimes the smaller guys can be quicker to the basket as it bounces off the rim, going in different random directions. But at the same time, if you're taller, the likelihood that these forwards and centers who rebound a lot naturally are going to accumulate boards, to me, in my mind's logic, increases when you have those talented big guys on the floor. For example, if I want to go with the small ball logic, and I can rebound the ball with small players, if the small players that I have tend to not think rebound necessarily, they ain't Josh Hart, they ain't Lonzo Ball, you know what I'm saying, those rebounding guards, they're not Brandon Podziemski. You know, if they don't think like that, if they're not rebounders, then even though the idea that the smaller player can rebound the ball is in place, the likelihood that the big who thinks rebound, who often averages 7 or 8 boards or more a game, is going to rebound more any damn way. Just off of the strength of his mentality, being a player who's rebounded his entire career for a living, who was taught to rebound as a big man since he was a kid. So, though size matters in the end, my logic tells me that it's not just about the size of the player, but what they're used to because they're big players. When it comes to certain things, when it rebounding the ball, blocking shots and stuff like that, they think that. You feel me? It's sort of like the same thing when it comes to smaller guards and ball handling. Maybe I have some bigger guys who can ball hand very well. Maybe I got a Wembanyama and Lamar Odom type players who can dribble the ball like crazy at 7 feet. But the likelihood that I'm going to have more ball handling from smaller players is going to be evident in the sense that smaller players were taught to ball handle on average from player to player to player so much more than your big man is. You see what I'm saying? So if I value ball handling more like a guy like Darvin Ham did, then I'm going to probably want smaller players on the floor just to up the averages of those players being comfortable dribbling the ball. Not a perfect science, but the likelihood of you not being deficient in that area increases the more you have smaller guards on the floor. So when it comes to rebounding, I wanted to articulate this exactly the way I just did. I do believe that if I have bigger players on the floor, I'm more likely to gobble up more boards. And although a lot of times when I spoke that, I didn't articulate it to say that I believe that small players can rebound at all, or that small players can in fact rebound the ball, because as my basketball IQ grows, I have every understanding that smaller players, if they're positioned correctly, can rebound. But they're not likely to think board all game long like the big man is. They're not likely to think board. So if I am so desperate to not leave myself bleeding on the boards with second chance points going to the other team and cutting off my possessions at one on every time down, then I probably would be likely to rely upon the players that are known for rebounding the ball, which on average more so is a big man than a small guy, depending on the personnel. Unless I just targeted a bunch of Josh Harts and Podziemskis, then I expect to rebound the ball all day with them small dudes. You see what I'm saying? So that's what I wanted to articulate, man. I don't like small ball. I don't like small ball. To the eye test, it doesn't work. In listening to basketball geniuses talk, they give it a more chance of working than my eye test tells me. But then when I double back to the concept I just gave you, I still don't like it for rebounding. And I believe that the game of basketball, though complex, is very simple. If you control the boards, you got more chances at not only getting the shots up that you need, but taking the shots away from the other team. So I think it's rather simple. If you control basketball rebounds, chances are you got the best chance of winning the game. I think that's one of the most important factors of a game to game to game. No matter really what type of game you're playing, you got a much better chance to win if you control the boards. So that's what used to just drive me crazy over the last 3 coaches that we've had, because we've punted the boards for the sake of getting back, for the sake of small ball rotations with small guys that didn't equate to rebound the ball very well, and then we get killed on the glass, second chance points, being small, losing games that way. And it was an eyesore, and of course in losing, we became irritated. So I just want our coach, Redick, to take into account how tired Laker fans are with the small ball rotations because of what it is we just described. It really has cost us a lot of opportunities and victories, man. A lot. Not just last year, not just the year before, but dating back to when we had Frank Vogel. And even before that, with Luke Walton. They all like to go small, and we'd always get killed on the glass, and we'd always end up losing games that way. It was ugly, man. It was ugly. So I hope that we have a coach in place that can just humor me a bit, and go big more than you go small, man. That's what I want. And if it doesn't equate to us winning, forgive me is what I would tell you. I don't want to see small lineups anymore. I really don't. Even if the logic kind of lines up, I still don't really want to see it, if I'm being completely honest with you. There will be circumstances where it makes sense to line your players up that way on the basketball floor in order to win. I don't doubt that. There are going to be circumstances where it probably is in your best interest to exploit bigger players by going small. That is deeply understood. I'm just speaking from a preferential standpoint when it comes to having lost games so much in this fashion. I just honestly hate watching it now. I hated watching it then, but I really hate watching it now. So I'll tell you like this. If JJ Redick wants to lose me personally as a Laker fan, run small ball 90% of the time. I'll be calling for you to get the hell up out of here. I'm just being honest. Unless you can win that way. Unless it equates to us winning basketball games. Because if we get victories with that ugly style, I'll learn to love it. Because I'll then be able to negate the data that I've been shown and losing and getting my butt kicked that way over the course of 3 years with the notion that it works. And then I'll see what it is that everybody sees because it has exploited something that otherwise makes me a victor, so to speak, victorious. But if I keep losing that way and I see opportunities to rebound the ball left and right, if we just had somebody like Torre on the floor, or, if we just ran a little more lineups with some height on it, it just becomes a situation where you really find yourself unhappy watching Laker basketball. So that's what it comes down to for me. I want to win first, above style. But when I have so much data showing me that it doesn't work when we go small, I don't want to go small anymore. And I do believe that I'm going to beat the teams that do if I keep bigger players on the floor. It's just what I believe. I really believe that. Small ball teams haven't fared well in this NBA. The only one that's really done a good job is Golden State, and even they don't play as small as often they are able to audible into. When they win championships, they usually have a Draymond Green or Andrew Bogut. You know what I'm saying? They usually have somebody, Zaza Pachulia, somebody down there who can get them out of them small rotations and give them traditional center play to rebound the ball. So, I don't know. I just think there's a strong correlation in this era between losing and small ball rotations, man. I think that the data is there all up and down the league, not just with the Lakers. So, yeah, that's something I really want to say, man. That was important to me. What else, man? I always talk about the same talking points. Dalton Connect is always on my mind thinking about this season. He's probably the main thing I'm most excited about, to be honest with you. The main new factor that really makes me intrigued is this player, man. And like I said many times, I don't doubt his defense is going to suffer because he's not a good defensive player. He doesn't think defense. He doesn't necessarily play it well. He's gonna be bad on the defensive end until he gets better. The improvement is going to have to come from not only an effort standpoint, but more so just a physical standpoint. He's going to have to learn how to slide his feet and stay in position and all these different things that come with it. It's going to take some time for him there. But on the offensive end, I expect for him to come in a pro right away. From what I've seen and studying him, shooting the ball and stuff like that, that's a pro. He's a pro. He's coming in. He's going to score a lot. Don't be surprised if he has games in this season where he goes for over 30 points. Do not be surprised by that. Because I fully expect for him, once he gets his feet under him, if he doesn't have any injuries, setbacks, I expect for him to have games where he goes over 30 points as a rookie season. I expect it. And I know a lot of people are like, no way. No, I definitely do, man. I definitely do. And I wouldn't say that with many rookies, but he was born to score. Born to score, natural from behind the arc, both off the catch and off the dribble, which is going to be a treat to watch for the Laker fans. And he really does take to the rim very well. He can put some pressure on the rim. He rebounds in an explosive way on putbacks and dunks like that, two-hand dunks. This is a guy who's more explosive than he's going to look to a lot of people early on. And I'm not going to be surprised by his success. I'm really not. I'm not going to be surprised by his success. I already have him on several fantasy teams. I think he's going to be very relevant, man. I don't think he's going to start right away because of his defensive deficiencies and because of how our lineup is laid out. But it's going to become very clear to everybody on this team that he's probably going to be one of our most talented scorers right away. It's going to be very clear. So that's what I want to say, man. I'm not going to be surprised at all by his success, man. Him kicking butt out there, scoring the ball, and from many different angles. He's naturally gifted in that way. You ain't got to teach him. And unlike a lot of rookies, he's been in college for many years at this point. 5 years in college. So you ain't got to teach him how to play against grown men. He's a grown man, you know. Much more advanced than your Jalen's. Much more advanced than, the young fella, Bronny James, you know. And that's somebody else I'm actually excited about. If utilized correctly, I do think Bronny James is going to turn into a pro by the end of the season, depending on how many minutes he's able to receive early on. I don't think he's going to just suck out there. I really don't. I was rather comfortable with him on the floor in the summer league. He did have that stinker of a basketball game where he went 0 for 8 from behind the arc. But I think it was because he realized that he was being a little too bashful from behind the arc early on in the games before that. So as a result, he ended up trying to overshoot in the game that we saw him in, where he went 0 for 8. And as a result, I think it would look very bad for him. But if you take into account that he's not going to be the volume shooter that ultimately he tried to be in that particular basketball game, you're going to understand that throughout the course of letting the game come to him offensively, he's going to be able to help the team in other areas. He's going to pass first. He's going to have some athletic moments where he has highlights, dunking the ball, blocking shots even, especially chase down blocks, for which he has just like his pops. And I think if he just finds a sweet medium with his aggression, he's going to find himself being a good basketball player on the pro level. But he can't be so confused as to do too little or do too much shooting the ball. And it's going to take some time for him to find that sweet medium. And he is a true freshman. I've played only a portion of his first and only collegiate season at USC. So when you talk about the young fella, we got to take into account that just like Jalen Hood-Schifino, he's not a grown man, unlike Dalton Knecht, who's coming in his 20s, mid-20s. This guy's coming in at what, 21? I think the young fella may be 21 at this point, 20 years old. So we got to be patient with these young guys and know the difference between rookies when they come in having played plenty college and what that's supposed to look like on average, and when a guy has played only 1 year college and what that's supposed to look like on average. Because the young guys that just come in fresh, you can't expect for them to come in and be killers like that. It takes some time for them to grow not only into their body, but into being pros, into being men, and ultimately thinking the game of basketball on a pro level. It's a lot of different coming of age factors that need to be taken into account versus a guy who plays in college for 4 straight years and then comes in his 20s, who should be ready to go like a Jaime Hawkins or Dalton Knecht. You know what I mean? These type of guys, they play many years of college, man. They work out all of some of that bad stuff that you see some of these freshman rookies come in with. They work that stuff out on the NBA floor in the G League. Some of them older guys, nah, they don't have to. So that's the good thing about just having an understanding. You know, a lot of times people just think rookie is a rookie. No, man. Find out how many years these dudes played in college. Find out how many years these guys played overseas. And then that'll determine how much you can expect for them to contribute in their rookie seasons, in a lot of cases. So that's what the thought is. But I think Bronny's going to turn out to be a nice player, man. I really think that. And I think genetics work in his favor as well. Because he's a James, he comes in with grown man muscle and grown man strength. I think that's really part of the process for young players, is getting the strength on their body that young Bronny is born with. He already has it. So that's going to put him ahead of guys in his class who happen to be freshmen. Because a lot of them dudes, they got to hit the weight room for at least 2-3 years to be able to bang around with grown men. I don't think Bronny's not that problem at all. I think he's there now. So that's what excites me about young Bronny James. It's just the genetic factor, you know. Some guys, you know, they don't have to really work out too hard to have grown man muscle as young players. And I think Bronny's one of them dudes. I really believe that. So will I feel comfortable putting him on the floor? As long as he keeps his thinking cap on. You know what I mean? It's all about how well he thinks the game and how well he takes to the speed of the game. And that only becomes natural to guys with reps in this league. You know, a lot of the foreign players say that it's easier to score in the NBA than it is in overseas because defense is much more physical out there in different places like Europe. You know, they got to push harder against grown men who have less to lose, less to gain and more to lose in regards to being cut for these teams. So they foul harder, these type of things. You know, they play with a more blue-collar way of basketball play rather than a lot of superstars who, you know, really don't stand to gain too much from banging too much, you know. So I'm just curious to see how Bronny takes to the ultimate sport of NBA basketball specifically early on, and how much time he'll actually get, because obviously we're going to see him in the G League. From what I understand, there's a chance they may play him in the very first game of the season, regular season, so that he can get that moment with his father out the way, and then allow for him to have more of a balanced rookie season, playing some G League minutes, having already set the tone for that type of history that we're ultimately aiming for as an organization. So, I'm excited about that for them, for the James gang. I think LeBron's looking forward to that about as much as anybody's looking forward to anything in the world. You know what I mean? This has been his dream the whole time, and it was finally arrived. And, I think part of the goal should be to win the game we're in that situation. A lot of times when we celebrated individual success and individual milestones as a team, we failed in the game we're in. Playing against Denver, getting beat, putting up statues, getting beat, celebrating milestones, getting beat all different types of ways. I think that the most important thing, if we really want everything to come together in regards to this history we're trying to set, is to win basketball games. Because if the team sucks, they're going to make that what people talk about. You know what I mean? That's what it really comes down to. So for LeBron James to remain focused on the bigger picture, I know you got your son in the building now, so it could be a distraction. It really can. The notion that you have other things to focus on in regards to your son being on the team every day, how people are taking to him, how his, different things, just in general, being a dad, how he's doing. In the adjustment, his safety, you know what I mean? That type of stuff. Trying to make sure guys aren't trying to flagrant foul him. A million different things that a dad has to consider, a responsible dad's going to consider when his son's in the room versus when he's not. And so it's a lot of stuff that we have to see LeBron go through that is unprecedented territory for him at this point. The day in, day out of being dad as a professional. That's going to be a tricky balance for anyone. And I'd imagine LeBron is included in that, How is your son going to take to situations when we lose? How is he going to take to situations when players may have a rift with him? Maybe he get into it with somebody. Maybe he has some people on the team he don't like and don't like him. How is Bron going to handle those circumstances as a teammate to the players that don't like his son? These are situations that can implode a lineup, a locker room quickly. Guys picking sides and stuff like that. And, the notion that one guy is getting treated differently because of this or that. You don't want none of that getting in the way of wins this year. Because at the end of the day, the best thing the Lakers can do for themselves is win. In regards to all of these different narratives and things that the Lakers are trying to accomplish historically. You got to win, man. It can't just be us out there running around for different reasons, celebrating ourselves as the victories don't come. Nah, they got to come. So that's what I'm saying to you guys. I think, a lot of times I heard LeBron say many times, you keep the main thing, and everything else falls into place. Well, he's going to have to practice that in a way that he hasn't had to practice it before. You know what I mean? Really. The main thing going to have to be the main thing. Because not only is your legacy on the line, but the course of what your son's future in the league will be more or less accredited to the team's success while he's on the team. So if he's a part of a losing squad, it's going to be much harder for him to continue going forward. But if we win, then it's going to be much more likely that he's going to be able to go forward as a winning player who's going to be wanted by other teams in the much distant future. You know what I mean? So getting off to a good start, especially when all the eyes are on him, it's something that his dad's going to have to spearhead. Because at the end of the day, Bronny is a role player. LeBron James and Anthony Davis are the stars. And given the fact that they're the ones with the most experience and likely the responsibility for whether this team is successful or not, their ability to lead this team to victories will determine the trickle-down success of everybody else on the team. And given the fact that we are under talented, I guess you could say, bunch at this point, based on championship expectations, it's going to take the will of our two leaders to lead us from night to night to tough victories. And that's what it's going to be about. How many tough victories can we manage to get in a season like this where so much is up against us? Transition to a different thought. I did like what I saw from the highlights of Koloko, the young fella that we just picked up out of Toronto. Saw some more highlights from him. What intrigues me about him that I didn't necessarily have to say before is how well he guards on the perimeter as a 7-footer. He is a really, really athletic specimen when it comes to chasing around guys who are ball handlers on the perimeter. That attribute is going to get him minutes, I believe. I believe he's going to earn minutes if he's able to successfully lock down people on the perimeter and trek back into the center of the court, or rather into the paint, and block shots and rebound. If he can do both, he's going to earn minutes. And so that's what the difference is between what I thought I knew about this kid and what I've ultimately come to understand. Is how well he can trek back and forth. Sort of like Tristan Thompson, sort of like Vanderbilt. I think those guys are on a much higher level, but at the same time, it's like that's the attribute. Draymond Green, you want to see your bigs be able to do that. Evan Mobley, be able to guard the perimeter, being taller and longer than the people in front of him, and then being able to trek all the way to the paint and block their shot. He gets off the floor very quickly. With the long arms and the height, it really, really is a plus that he is very athletic and jumps quickly and has good instincts and timing blocking shots. So, this kid, Koloko, I think the upside is still pretty strong. He was taken in the second round about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that. I think he was taken in the Josh Green draft. I believe he was part of that draft with Chet Holmgren and Paolo Banchero. I believe that was the year. I don't know if Green was part of that year or not, but I think he's from one of those two drafts, or maybe that was the same draft. It's all blurry to me. But the point is, he came out in that range. He's that young. So the upside that he was expected to show in his development process is still ongoing. And you talk about players like Jackson Hayes. He's younger than that guy. You know what I mean? He's underclassed than him. So the upside there should be, there's optimistic vibes in regards to Koloko. He could really turn out to be an asset for us. Maybe more so than I anticipate. So that's what I want to say. You consider how much trouble we've had guarding players on the perimeter at times, depending on who's on the floor. Maybe he can help, patch the bandage situation there. Depending on how our backcourt looks, maybe he can help with that. If Vanderbilt ain't healthy, maybe if he's on the floor, he can kind of patch up some of our defensive holes that we didn't have an opportunity to do last year with our personnel being as it was. So that's what I'm thinking, man. I'm hopeful. From what I saw, although it was a small sample size, G League level, he looked explosive. He looked very explosive on both sides of the floor. Limited on the offensive end, but very tooly on the defensive end. And I think that can equate to him being pretty good for us. So, yeah, that's what I want to say, man. I think if he looks like he did in those highlights, we really got something going for ourselves. And you consider the addition of him and what's our other guy? Torrey. I think it's Torrey. Both of them can do that. So you talk about not really necessarily having that piece last year while Vanderbilt was out, to potentially having it on the floor at all times, depending on how coach wants to rotate. So I think that can have a substantial difference to some of the things that ultimately got us beaten last year. Although we have very subtle changes to our roster, those are key elements that come in and patch up some very key holes that this roster had last year. And that's why I don't know if people got it right when they say that this team needed to make drastic changes to most definitely improve. I think some of these subtle changes were what the team actually really needed. I think that. And with the addition of Koloko specifically, on top of what we retained, I think we'll be fine so long as we don't have a down year from all of the other guys, so to speak. We get a good Russell year, get a good Austin year. I think we could potentially be pleased with what the overall collective looks like as a unit. So that's what I'm hoping. Not certain, hopefully. But, you know, I'm an optimistic Laker fan, and I understand that we already have two of the best players on the planet. They just need to have the stuff around them come together a bit better. And one of the issues that we had, of course, that we talk about all the time, was the issue with our backcourt being able to defend. You know, Austin Reeves and D'Angelo Russell together, they tend to leave a lot of holes out there. Guys run past them, this and that. Well, with the addition of these two shot blockers who jump off the floor and have high energy, maybe that closes that problem a bit better, so long as we keep one or both of those guys on the floor while they're out there. Maybe we don't have to rely upon Rui Hachimura as much on the perimeter if we have one of those two players who can guard the perimeter at height on the floor. And we can have some more productive non-AD minutes. Defensively, specifically, which is ultimately what kind of hurt us last year. Those non-AD minutes, we were pretty trash defensively. I think this unit should, in theory, be better in that way with the addition of those two players and maybe with the reinstallation of Gabe Vincent into the lineup, who's just naturally a much more talented defensive player than either D'Lo or Austin in the point of attack circumstances. So, you know, subtle changes can change everything. To not know why you lost would kind of be what leads Laker fans in the wrong direction when assessing what they needed to win. You know what I mean? It's like you didn't have every problem in the world. You had certain problems that you couldn't patch. That was the problem with the Lakers. So if you bring in the right pieces that can patch those problems while not getting rid of any of the stuff that ultimately did work, well, you find yourself winning maybe 7-8 more games if those patches work, so to speak. If you can really patch up them holes, you ain't going to lose some of the same games you lost last year. I don't think a lot of Laker fans know why they lost some of them games, man. That's what it comes down to. People just think, oh, man, we suck. These guys can't win. No, these guys had certain weaknesses that we just could not patch up. And you couple that with the coach logic in regards to rotations, it just led to a lot of failure, man. But you remove that coach, and then you bring in some of those pieces that'll patch up those problems, and suddenly you can see where it would make sense to believe you can win some of them games you lost. So that's what I want to say, man. Just overall, I think with the Koloko and Torrey additions, we've patched up some spots that needed to be patched in order for us to win. And that's why I wanted us to get this big man. That's exactly why I'm so glad we did that before the start of the season, because I can't say I felt that way about our rotation patterns right now before bringing in Koloko. You know, but you add that 7-footer, suddenly it slots everybody else into a position to where you can afford to let Christian Wood take his time coming back. You can afford for Vanderbilt to more or less take his time coming back. You can afford maybe, you know, certain guys like Austin and D'Lo to be on the floor and not necessarily be great defenders at all. You know, it just allows for certain things that were a problem to not be as much of a problem, which is really what it was all about. So, yeah, man, that's really much my thought on things. Update, we know for a fact that the guy that we waived went to the Golden State Warriors. The shooter out of Pitt, Blake Hinson, ended up signing with the Warriors. Two-way, not really sure. I don't know to what capacity, but he's going to take his three-point shooting talents to a place that shoots threes all day, so I think he'll fit there very well. I don't know how much playing time he'll get, but he can continue the pattern of the Golden State Warriors being an elite three-point shooting team, which is ultimately probably a better spot for him in the long run, when you really consider it. So I think there are a lot of people who are going to be upset about that, especially since he's going to one of our rivals. But I'm not one of them. I particularly don't care that he's not going to be a part of this thing based on our needs at that center position being filled. So that's my thought on that. And yeah, man, excited about Laker basketball, man. We got what? Maybe 31 more days before the start of the regular season, and maybe half of that in regards to starting the preseason. So, you know, we can start having some data from which to look at in regards to this unit, kind of see how we line up, trying to just gauge what it is that J.J. Redick's style of coaching could potentially look like. You know, get that first coaching game in the bag with him. Hopefully he does well, man, because to be honest with you, he's never coached a real team in his life. And that's just crazy when considering that this is the best of the best in the top level. You know, that you don't normally think that would be a good decision for a team at this level to hire a rookie coach. When you consider the basketball mind of this guy and the options that we ultimately had, I think it was a solid choice, and hopefully he makes us feel great about it, with expectations lowered for the start of the process for him. He's going to have to become a coach on the fly, and however long that takes for him to get used to being a coach is just what we're going to have to live with. So, you know, that hurts in considering what our expectations for championship could potentially be if we had a real experienced coach. But I think just the same, you can argue that J.J. Redick's probably smarter than a lot of these experienced coaches, to be completely honest with you. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what his imagination for the sport of basketball and his experience as a great shooter can potentially mean for his coaching career. So, yeah, that's really much what I got to say, man. This heavy backpack needs to come off. I'm pretty exhausted from this walk, but I'm glad you guys were here to let me do my thing, talk Laker basketball. My name is BDL44. Thank you all for watching.